Hello. I just wanted to do a quick review on these Create Originals OG frames. I got them a few weeks ago from the Them Goods shop online, and I've been really enjoying them. Yeah, I got them a few weeks ago, 75 bucks shipped for the frames and the hardware. They did not come with the graphic inserts, which go here, that these frames are very well known for. I got them in white, as you can see, in the size large. The large is a 265 millimeter wheelbase, but I'll talk a little bit more about the sizing later in the video. So starting off with some of the pros, the things that I like about the frame. For one thing, they roll and they skate really smooth and fast, like noticeably faster than my last pair of frames, which were the Featherlight 3s from Ground Control. Great frames. If you look at the ground controls, overall they're a pretty flimsy frame. Like you could bend the frames very easily with like minimal effort. So think about like all of your full body weight on the frame. Like it definitely sacrifices a bit of power transfer, and these frames are much more rigid. Also, the tolerances on the wheels much tighter with the frame spacers, so that the wheels are a bit difficult to install. You got to kind of really jam them in to get them into position, but it results in a really tight fit with the bearing and the frame, and it just results in a really fast and smooth roll. These bearings that I'm using are like well over a year old, and I never cleaned them. I've just been using them as is, and they're spinning faster than they've ever spun on the Featherlights. Another thing that I really like about these frames, which is very important for frames, is how do they grind. Yeah, I really like how they grind. You could see I set these up for anti-rocker. I don't really intend to ride them flat. I may give it a try at some point, but anti-rocker is my go-to setup. And as far as an anti-rocker setup goes, yeah, these grind really well. The plastic is fast and durable. I skated this mostly at skate parks and didn't really have to wax much unless it was like a really rusty ledge or something, but for the most part, slides just fine. The groove itself is very nice. It's very it's deep and pronounced, but not so deep that like it'll make your Royales like super stand up. As far as like the angle goes for groove tricks, you can still get nice and low, but it still has a nice pronounced groove so you don't slip out of tricks. It's reminiscent of like a 50/50 prime frame groove or like a Kaiser Fluid 4 groove. The wheel spacing on the two middle wheels is I think about 115 millimeters, which provides a nice wide H block. And again, I'm coming from the Featherlight 3s, and the spacing on the middle two wheels for the Featherlight 3 is 100 millimeters, or about 101. It's actually, I realized, it's the tightest spacing on the middle two wheels out of any frame on the market. So getting an extra 15 millimeters on the spacing, it's a pretty significant difference. And I do notice that like locking onto groove tricks is more consistent for me. Like I don't slip out and lock onto the outside channels by accident as much anymore. And by the way, all of these numbers that I'm pulling for the spacing and stuff like that on the frames, it's all coming from whatframes.com. It's an awesome website. I highly recommend. It has all of the spacing and specs for all of the frames from all of the manufacturers and all the sizes. And it has like even a graphic that you could overlay different frames and compare the sizings. Great reference if you're looking for a new frame and you need to sort out the sizing. In addition, the frames have a recessed wall, so you don't have that surface area touching when you're doing like sole grinds and topside grinds. The bottom of the frame is angled and beveled, so when you turn, you don't scrape the concrete and slip out. The frames are pretty light. I didn't weigh them myself, but I read the spec, and they're about 8 to 9 ounces per frame. I think in the large size, and then that's about the same weight as the Featherlight 3s. And another thing I like about the frames, or the frame company I should say, is that it's a skater-owned company, and I didn't know that Billy O'Neill is a co-founder of the Create Originals brand. That's really awesome. Billy O'Neill is like one of my favorite rollerbladers of all time, so I'm happy to support a skater-owned brand, although I'm not sure if he's still involved in the brand or not, but anyway. However, nothing is perfect, unfortunately, and yeah, there are a couple minor things I would change about these frames if it were up to me. For one thing, these are still using the double-sided axles. You need 2 hex keys. I think most people would agree. It would be nice if you switched to the single-sided axles. Another thing is, just for me personally, I like frames that have that plastic bridging across these 2 wheels here. You'll notice it in frames like the Them Street frame or the Rossi's frames, Symmetrics. They all have that bridge, and I think that adds a bit of extra rigidity to the frame, which improves the power transfer and responsiveness. It's totally fine. It's not a big deal. Like I mentioned earlier in the review, you know, these frames are still very rigid and very smooth feeling, but I feel like that adds a little bit of extra rigidity if you have those bridges. And lastly, my last critique of this frame is the sizing. So these frames only come in a small and a large. The small is a 245 wheelbase, and the large, which is this, is a 265 wheelbase. And for me personally, it's just like, you know, the small is too small and the large is too large. I just wish they had like a medium frame, like right in between, like a 255 would be like perfect for what I'm looking for. That's one factor where the Featherlights have an advantage, is that the Featherlights come in 3 sizes. You know, since I am riding anti-rocker, you already are kind of in that train track feeling. And so I tend to prefer frames that are on the shorter side. I think it helps with maneuverability, and personally I'm trying to learn like swivels and like U-turns, heel rolls, toe rolls, and all of those kinds of like flat ground tricks are a little bit easier when you have a shorter frame. Now a longer frame, you get like more stability when you're landing tricks and rolling around, but it's a little bit harder to get those carves and those turns and those maneuvers. If you're riding flat, the sizing on these frames is probably fine. But for me, riding anti-rocker, I try and get every bit of maneuverability out of my setup as possible. The 245 is way too short for me. I've ridden 245 frames. This is a Kaiser Fluid 5. This is 245 millimeters. I've ridden this both anti-rocker and flat, and it just feels way too squirrely. But then on the other hand, these frames, which are 265, I feel like it's just a little bit too big for me. Again, if they made something in like the 255 range, like these Featherlight mediums, that would be perfect. But having said that, and I can still manage like some of those flat ground tricks, it's just a little bit more difficult. So it's not the biggest deal. I'll get used to it, and I'm sure I'll get accustomed to the longer wheelbase. So overall, that's all I got. I really enjoy the frames. You know, they roll well, they grind well, which is really, that's what matters in a frame, right? You know, there's only a couple of small minor things that I would change about the frames that I mentioned. But overall, I would highly recommend them to anyone looking for a good anti-rocker frame. I probably rate them overall 8 out of 10. Yeah, 8 out of 10. So yeah, that's all I got. Here's some skating clips of me riding the frames. Appreciate you watching. Have a great day. Bye.